11 years I stood 3 paces from Corporal Edmund Cole, and in all that time I never once saw him move without an order. Not when a wasp landed on his lip in August and stayed there for what felt like a full minute. Not when a drunk tourist threw a paper cup at his boots and the crowd laughed. Some of the younger guardsmen called him the statue, behind his back, half in mockery and half in awe. I called him the steadiest man I'd ever served beside, and I'd served beside men in places I still don't talk about. There's a particular kind of discipline that doesn't look like discipline to most people. They see the bearskin, the red tunic, the white gloves, and they think costume. They don't see what it costs to hold a body perfectly motionless for 2 hours in the cold, or in the heat, with your knees locked just so, and your breathing slowed to almost nothing, while strangers lean in close enough to fog your eyebrows with their breath, daring you to so much as twitch. Cole had that discipline the way some men have a height or a build. It wasn't something he reached for. It was simply what he was made of. That afternoon, the light was doing that low gold thing it does over Aldenmere in late summer, turning the cobblestones the color of warm brass and making even the iron railings look soft. The crowd at the eastern gate was thin. Us Tuesday. No parade, just the usual tourists and the usual murmurs about the bearskins, the usual children asking their parents why the guards don't blink. I had the post beside Cole, 40 minutes to the changing of the guard. Routine the way every day at that post was routine, which is exactly why I remember every detail of the day it wasn't. That's when the boy came to the railing. His mother carried him, though he looked 9, perhaps 10, too big to be carried, and far too light for it. A blanket was wrapped around his shoulders despite the warmth of the afternoon. His face had that particular thinness you only see in hospital wards, the skin drawn tight over the bone beneath, the eyes too large for it, the kind of eyes that have already seen more waiting rooms than playgrounds. She set him down gently against the iron railing so he could stand on his own for a moment, holding most of his weight still, and she looked at Cole the way people look at lighthouses, like he was something fixed and permanent in a world that had stopped being either. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was steady, but it had been crying recently. You could hear the wreckage underneath it, the careful way people speak when they're holding themselves together by main force. "I know you can't talk. I know you're not allowed to even look at us, not really. I wanted him to see you, up close. It's his birthday today." She paused, and I watched her decide whether to say the next part. She said it anyway. "The doctors think it's his last one. He's read every book about the guard there is. He wanted to come and wish himself happy birthday, standing where you stand." I felt my own throat tighten, and I kept my eyes forward, because that is the job, eyes forward, no matter what passes in front of them. Cole did not move, not his eyes, not his jaw, not the white-gloved hand resting easily on the rifle sling. 11 years, and I had learned to read the smallest things in that stillness. The barely there shift of weight before a long stand, the particular set of his shoulders in cold rain, and even I could not tell, in that first second, whether he had heard her at all. The boy looked up at him. There was no fear in it, none of the shyness you'd expect from a child meeting a man 6.5 feet tall in a bearskin and a red tunic. There was only the open, unguarded hope that children have left when almost everything else has already been taken from them. "Happy birthday," the boy said to Cole, in a small, careful voice, as if he were the one giving the gift, not receiving one. 40 seconds passed. I counted them, because counting was easier than feeling them. And because some part of me already understood that something was about to happen that I would need later to be able to put in order. Then Cole's chin dropped. Not far, an inch, maybe less, but it was enough. For the first time in 11 years that I had personally witnessed, his eyes left their fixed point on the middle distance and came down and met a 9-year-old boy's. The crowd noticed. Phones came up around the square, that low murmur of recognition that something was different. Somewhere behind us, a mother told her son to be quiet. "Quick, look at this." And Cole stepped off his post. I want to be precise about what that means, because people who have never worn the uniform don't always understand the weight of it. 11 years, through state visits and through rain that came in sideways and stung like gravel. Through the day his own father was buried 100 miles away, and Cole stood his post that morning anyway, because that is what the post means. It means more than any single life standing inside it, including his own. 11 years without once leaving that square of stone before he was relieved or ordered. He crossed the 6 feet to the railing in 4 steps, Slow, unhurried. The way a man walks when he has already made a decision and is simply carrying it out, with no part of him left undecided. He went down on one knee on the cobblestones, the red wool of his tunic pooling against the gray stone, the bearskin tipping forward so that for a moment his face was half in shadow. And then he was eye to eye with the boy. "Thomas," the mother whispered. And I understood she was telling her son to remember this, to hold on to it, because she already knew there would not be many more days for him to remember anything at all. Cole reached up with one gloved hand and unclasped something from the breast of his own tunic. I knew what it was before I saw it clearly, because I had stood beside that uniform for 11 years and knew every thread of it. It was his service medal, the one awarded for a deployment that nobody at the palace ever asked him about, because, as far as the palace's records were concerned, it had not happened to him at all. I knew the truth of it only because I had once, years ago, seen a citation filed under a name spelled slightly differently than his own. Cole had come back from that posting reported among the dead. A clerical error, a body misidentified in the confusion of a bad week, never fully corrected, and rather than fight years of paperwork to prove he existed, he had simply re-enlisted under the spelling everyone at the palace already used for him. A man the official records said had died, standing a post that required him every single day to be perfectly visibly alive. He pinned the medal to the blanket over the boy's chest, and his hands were steady doing it. Of course they were. They were always steady. "That's for you," Cole said. His voice was low and rough, and it took me a moment to understand why, because I realized with a strange, small jolt that in 11 years I had never once heard him speak. Is this really yours?" the boy asked, his hand closing around the medal as if it might fly away if he let go. "It's yours now," Cole said. "A soldier gives it to whoever he believes deserves it most. Today, that's you. You earned it just by getting here." The boy's mother had both hands pressed over her mouth. The crowd around us had gone almost entirely silent. Even the phones seemed to lower a fraction, as though the moment required both hands to hold properly. 40 minutes later, the relief guard arrived at the eastern gate for the changing of the post, and stopped, all four of them at once, at the sight of an empty square of stone where Corporal Cole should have been standing. I won't pretend I wasn't afraid for him, watching that, leaving a post mid-watch, without relief, without an order. That is not a matter of a quiet word afterward. That is a board of inquiry. That is 11 years of an unblemished record, undone in the space of 4 steps across cobblestone. But Cole did not move from the boy's side. He stayed down on one knee, talking quietly. I couldn't hear the words, and I didn't chew. Whatever he said, the boy had stopped trembling, and was laughing now, a small, tired laugh, and his mother was crying in the particular way people cry when grief and gratitude arrive in the same breath and can no longer be told apart. The sergeant of the relief guard was a man named Pruitt, who I had always privately thought had about as much warmth in him as the iron railings he guarded. I braced myself for what I assumed would come next. Pruitt striding across the forecourt, hauling Cole up by the collar, the whole humiliating business of it playing out in front of 40 phone cameras. Instead, Pruitt did something I will never forget as long as I live. He raised one hand and halted the relief guard exactly where they stood, and then he waited. Word travels inside the walls of Aldenmere faster than anyone in the ranks ever officially admits. By the time Cole finally rose, brushed the dust from his knee, and walked the 11 paces back to his post, the captain of the watch was already standing there. Not with a face for discipline, but with the kind of nod that says more than any speech ever could. "Walk with me, Corporal," the captain said quietly. And that was all. I never learned the full content of that walk, and I never asked. What I do know is that the next morning, the changing of the guard at the eastern gate was delayed by exactly 6 minutes, long enough that Cole, off duty, out of his ceremonials, and in a plain greatcoat, was standing quietly near that same railing, when the boy's mother brought him back one last time, in a wheelchair now, before they returned to the hospital for good. Nobody had ordered any of it. Nobody had written it into a schedule. The regiment had simply, without a single word spoken in any mess hall I sat in that week, made room. Thomas died 11 days later. His mother sent a letter to the barracks afterward, addressed simply, "To the guard who knelt." It made its way through 3 different desks before someone realized who it was meant for, and brought it to Cole personally, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the duty room while Cole read it, standing at attention, as if a letter could be inspected the way a uniform could. Inside was a photograph, the boy, thin and smiling in his wheelchair, the metal pinned slightly crooked over his heart, and beside him, for the only time any camera ever caught it in all his years of service, Corporal Edmund Cole, looking directly into the lens. Not a statue at all, a man. The letter itself was short. I only know 2 lines of it, because Cole read them aloud once, years later, to a young recruit who'd asked him, carefully, the way you ask a man about a scar, what the photograph in the duty room meant. The mother had written that Thomas had worn the medal every day after that, even in the hospital, even at the end, and that he had told her it was the best birthday present anyone had ever given him, because it meant someone had finally looked at him and seen a person, not an illness. That photograph hangs now in the duty room at the eastern gate, where every guardsman assigned to that post sees it before he steps out onto the stone. Cole never asked for it to be hung there, and he never once mentioned the boy again in all the years I served beside him afterward. But I noticed something every single day after that one. At the eastern gate, in the seconds just before the relief arrived for the changing of the guard, Cole's eyes would drop, just for an instant, just that same single inch, toward the railing where a boy named Thomas had once stood on his last birthday and wished a statue many happy returns. Then his chin would lift again, and he would be still, perfectly, unbreakably still, the way he had been every day for 11 years before that one, and every day after. That is the part people get wrong about men like Cole. They believe the stillness means nothing reaches him, that there is nothing underneath it to reach. They have it backwards. The stillness is what a man builds, brick by brick, year by year, around the things that matter to him most, so that when it counts, just once, in front of a crowd of strangers and 100 raised phones, he can step off 11 years of stone, kneel in the dust of a forecourt, and give away the one piece of proof he has that he is still alive, to a boy who needed, more than any medal, more than any cure, simply to be seen.